This is for those who know what it is like to have a bipolar disorder or know someone who has a bipolar disorder. I went 30 years untreated with a bipolar disorder with schizoaffective tendencies. This is my story. I learned over time how crazy, how absolutely fucking absurd life can be, and how insanely cruel, and makes you feel like you're in a fucking surrealistic nightmare. And if something bad can happen, I usually ended up experiencing it. So many times, I just wanted to die. Why did so many bad things have to happen? I haven't quite figured that out yet. I tend to believe it is because of an insidious and demented Daemurge, a devil god that is running the show sadistically. After being kicked out of the house, I moved into the church dormitory of the church I was attending for a year now. Everyone in the church seemed supportive at the time. Apparently, God wanted me closer to the church, improving the proclivity of moving closer to God in my personal walk. It somehow seemed to make sense. It was only a matter of time before things turned sour again. There was only one reason for me to go to Alaska that I could see, and I wouldn't learn what that reason was for 16 years. If I hadn't met the couple who would be my friends while living in Anchorage, I would never have met my wife 6 years after I had left the church. That is not to say that Soldotna and Anchorage were not a living shit show nightmare. When I left the church, I had absolutely nothing. No direction, no noticeable purpose. In my second year with the church, I took a vacation to Anchorage as I had some friends that lived there and they looked forward to seeing me again. We were Dungeon and Dragons geeks and everyone wanted me to be the DM. I only expected to stay a couple of weeks, but I had not anticipated meeting a girl who would turn my head around and see to it that my weeks turned into months instead. The girl's name was Melissa, and we became a couple to my surprise, as though she was beautiful, sexy, and classy, and what she had seen in me I had no idea. After all, I never considered myself handsome or good looking. I never expected that a girl so attractive would ever take an interest in me. So I didn't pursue her. However, it didn't stop her from pursuing me. She even called her mother and told her all about me. Her mother wanted to speak with me, and when the conversation was over, the mother was convinced that her daughter was in good hands, which she was. When I returned home after 3 months, my pastors were not pleased with me by any scope. They had all thought that I had fornicated with Melissa while I was away. After all, I was a boy of 18, so obviously I couldn't keep it in my pants. And so, because of my alleged transgression, it was determined that the dorm would cast lots to see if I was still laudable enough to live in the dormitory. After the voting, it was determined that I was, in fact, still worthy to stay in the dorm, and I would do so for another 5 years. Melissa lived in Spokane, Washington. I wrote to her almost every day, writing pages that were like small books. However, one day I felt the notion to call Melissa. Her mother answered the phone and was so glad that I had called. It seemed that Melissa was not doing so well by herself. Hoping for the day that we would be together again was taking too long, and she was grief-stricken with longing. I told her that when the time was right, God would make a way for us to be together. However, I had recently received $1,000 dividend from the state and another $3,000 for a student loan, and as I look back, what more did I need to know to understand that the time was right? I felt it was time to talk to my pastors. After all, they would tell me what God really wanted for me, and what I wanted more than anything else was God's will. Food for thought, people. Don't ever wait on God in a relationship. Instead, follow your heart. I made the mistake of asking my pastors what I should do. Should I stay or should I go? They told me to stay. They did so by informing me that I would be leaving the church to pursue a relationship, and God would not want that. I would be letting myself be tempted like David with Bathsheba. It was one thing if Melissa wanted to move to Alaska, but it was quite another for me to move away from the church and put my soul in jeopardy. I had the means to go, and Melissa's parents even had an apartment that I could rent while attending college. It would be the perfect setup before Melissa and I would be married. But it was not to be. The relationship would come to a grinding halt, and by the time I was ready to leave the church 5 years later, Melissa would of course already be married. In the 7th year of attending the church and living in the dormitory, it suddenly seemed I could no longer do anything right in the eyes of God or my pastors. I was taking a shower one day, and Kim, one of the young men living in the dorm, entered the shower room and said, "Buck's here, and he wants to speak to you after you get out of the shower." I suddenly felt cold despite the heat of the shower. My intuition told me that Buck was in my room. And more, he was going through my treasure chest where I had $3,000 worth of comic books and half that dollar amount in D&D and module manual tools. And I was right, sure as spit. I was so spot on that the moments that followed seemed surreal to me. After showering and I got dressed and went into my room, sure enough, Buck was going through my treasure chest, shaking his head at everything he saw, everything that he took out and looked through. He was not a happy camper. Apparently, what had happened was that due to the comics that I sold and traded with kids in the church, their parents got a hold of what they had in their possession and thought them to be ungodly. And when the parents asked them where they got the comics, they told me they were from me. So, the parents talked to Buck and they told him that I apparently needed to re-examine my walk with God. Fuck the fact that everyone was reading Stephen King at the time. For this reason, I was concerned that I would have to give up my comic books and D&D collection, though initially I knew not why. Buck told me they were satanic, and that was that. I tried to explain to him that I was writing and illustrating my own comic books. He told me that a Christian didn't do what it was I was intending to do. So again, another opportunity that seemed right to me was again wrong in the eyes of God, and another dream dies. Simple as that.